This is Act 2, the finale of Terran Tales, when Earth broke the galaxy. The final battles begin. The reckoning is now. Comment your favorite Crow moment. Like, if you felt the pulse of humanity rise. Subscribe to follow the myth as it's made. This is no longer just a story. This is Terran history. Fort Aberdeen had always been a monument to Earth's worst anxieties. Cold walls of stone and steel thrust skyward, battered by wind, built when humanity still feared only itself. Now, under a sky bruised with the smoke of a distant war, Aberdeen was more than gauntlet or proving ground. It was forge and crucible. It was the place where yesterday's survivors were hammered into tomorrow's legends. The air was razor-sharp, carrying the scent of weld smoke and the pulse of 1,000 boots. Across the frozen drill fields, recruits from 15 continents stood, armor buckled over faded uniforms and inherited scars. Every nation's anthem had been replaced by a single signal, stitched in black thread and bitter memory. The Crow's wing, poised to defy oblivion. Brigadier General Omar Atieno paced before them, movements crisp, eyes hooded by the kind of exhaustion that only survivors earned. Stern. "Once you were many things," he said, voice cleaving through the wind, a scalpel's edge. Forceful. "Now you are Terran. That means you do not learn for medals. You learn because the enemy is watching." He gestured toward the assembled rows of alien observers, Valari with crystalline eyes, Rune swathed in breathing veils, Tsari shimmering with unease. Behind their screens and data slates, these dignitaries envisioned their models of humanity, unpredictable, volatile, a footnote with a pulse. Today, they saw something they could not quantify, a unity deeper than doctrine. The whistle screamed, the ground split open. Simulated wracked nests burst from hidden platforms, spewing drones and smoke. Recruits dove, not for cover, but to control the chaos, moving in rough teams stitched together in seconds. Fire crisped boots, plasma rods sparked against robotic limbs. "No formation will save you," Atieno bellowed. "Only adaptation, only memory, only each other." Somewhere above the clangor, a Valari observer murmured, "Awestruck. They make order from disaster. They grow with every wound." It was true. This was not the silent discipline of the old armies, nor the calculated precision the Alliance expected. It was noisy, full of curses and laughter and grim jokes hurled like grenades against despair. Teams collapsed and reformed. A limping recruit was dragged forward, not left behind. No mistake was allowed to rot. Every failure dissected on the spot, eyes locked, voices raised, arguments settling before the next drone strike. Atieno caught the gaze of the youngest recruit, a girl from Recife, whose hands still trembled at her rifle's grip. He nodded, not to praise, but to promise. "You will become what this war needs, something braver than what you know." By dusk, the drill field was chaos re-rendered as triumph. The alien observers, once recording data by rote, now leaned forward. Far from Earth's battered steel and human war cries, the axis of galactic order shifted slowly, groaning in resistance. The Tsari High Symposium met beneath the burrowing waves of Orman, in a chamber woven from living silk and phosphorescent coral, ancient walls shimmering with ancestral wisdom and the cold heat of memory. Here, diplomacy was art. Voices tuned for centuries to harmony and patience. But harmony shattered now. In the domed amphitheater, counselors of every hue spiraled into argument, their robes a blur of iridescence, their tentacles splayed with agitation. Gone was the old confidence, the assured calculation that once made the Tsari lords of subtlety. Now their voices quivered, hushed but urgent, and the room's hush was alive with dread. Projected above their council table pulsed a chaos unlike any before, a human battle, jittering in rough proxy-captured footage from Varnak 9. Earth's soldiers scattered and regrouped, shouting, laughing even as the world shook around them. To watch was to feel your equations failing. "Improvisation," muttered the elder of calculations, "on a scale we have never mapped. No projection we own will fit them now." Another, younger counselor, her eyes wide from weeks shadowing the Terran front, spoke what older voices dared not. "It's more than tactics," she said softly, her words rippling across the pool of advisors. "They do not value survival as we understand it. Their acceptance of loss is coin and contract, not defeat." A ripple of collective shock shuddered the room. Beneath the council platform, reactive lighting flickered, green for fear, amber for awe. From their vantage, Tazari scribes recorded every word, but for once found no wisdom to describe what they observed. Across the galaxy, in the orbital monasteries of the Rune, the same uncertainty echoed. The Rune, whose devotions were once as cold and predictable as orbital mechanics, began to abandon their models. Every day, algorithms failed to predict the latest Terran gambit. Every night, new simulations were torn up in frustrated silence. What once had been an equation was now a question. A high priest of logic addressed the congregation. "This species is error incarnate, but the result sometimes is victory." In every seat of power where the war was watched, human unpredictability rooted in minds like a seed. Allies and neutrals debated and despaired. Opponents grew wary, their certainty infected by doubt. For the first time in the age of the Great Alliance, none could look to the future and see themselves untouched by the shadow or the light growing from primitive soul. And so, in darkened halls and under distant oceans, the oldest powers finally whispered what they never dreamed. "We may not win, but perhaps we can learn." The unthinkable had taken root, and beyond it, something almost like respect. The moon, Varnak 9, hovered like a battered jewel on the rim of the shattered sector. A world of torn craters, once rich with mining and memory, churned now into a theater of peril. Every kilometer of its surface throbbed with warnings in a dozen alien tongues, contaminated, condemned, and contested. Yet, for humanity and their tentative allies, this forsaken rock became both shield and anvil, the gateway none could afford to yield. From orbit, the first glimpse was always the same. A landscape pitted with ancient scars and fresh wounds, sharp-edged shadows running hundreds of miles across the surface. Below, the lines of defense glowed faint blue and gold, haze swirling in chemical dawn. Then the human dropships fell. Iron streaks painting the sky, engines howling with the ferocity of desperation. When the boots hit ground, the world shuddered. Crows in tattered black raced from the hissing cargo bays, scattering into debris fields and fractured barricades, their movement neither wild nor ordered, but built on a code now carved into their marrow. Move, adapt, survive, together. Beside them surged allies. Rune in refractive armor, Tazari moving lively over toxic dust, Valari shielding squads from enemy scans. The clamor of multiple languages melded into a single war cry, the universal voice of those who would not break. The Vract, relentless and tireless, awaited them in numbers that blotted out hope. War machines like obsidian nightmares lurked at the horizon. Drones swarmed the sky, algorithms hunting for patterns they could cleave. But the humans, forged in Aberdeen's practice of chaos, offered none. Instead, they flowed through the wreckage, springing traps made from the very scrap of Varnak's dead industries, baiting drones into lines of fire, hijacking enemy comms with jokes and taunts. The rhythm of the siege was not one of advancing lines, but of sudden eruptions, partisan teams emerging from smoke, delivering blows, vanishing again. 3/4 through the grisly dawn, as the battle edged toward stalemate, a battered crow squad made its way beneath the shattered ribs of a mining conveyor. They dragged stolen Vract wartech behind them, jury-rigging it under fire. A few minutes of frantic work that would, against all logic, turn half the moon's comm relays against the invaders. In a world where survival seemed counting seconds, these moments rippled out, fracturing the Vract assault into confusion. In the trenches, new legends quietly took root. A Valari medic, shot through the shoulder, refused morphine to keep working. A Tassari shielded a wounded human with her own body as artillery raked the field. And every time chaos threatened to win, the phrase was whispered in every tongue: "No formation will save you, only each other." By dusk, the Vract lines faltered, not broken by overwhelming force, but by the impossible, a unity neither machine nor empire had ever faced before. On Varnock 9, disorder became defiance, and defiance, survival. While the siege raged in the bitter blue dawn of Varnock 9, a different battlefront unfurled across Earth's every city and dim-lit home. Warfare had once been a distant legend, blurred by distance, softened by time zones and sensors. No longer. Now conflict was a tide that swelled with every sunrise on a bright, spinning world whose survival was suddenly tangled with stars and monsters. From Tokyo's high towers to the markets of Lagos, from Berlin's banks to the coast of Valparaiso, the world's attention fused. News feeds pulsed in a continuous heartbeat. There were no ordinary days, only prolonged electric nights in which the voices of anchors replaced lullabies and distant gunfire became the new weather. Screens flickered in every gathering, in smoky bars, in silent living rooms, on colossal urban billboards above ant-like crowds. The faces that delivered the news changed, too. No longer dispassionate, they were raw, haunted, sometimes trembling, sometimes fierce. Anchors spoke not merely of losses and tactical gains, but of hope and cost. A grizzled man whose voice once debated fiscal forecasts now leaned forward, hands clasped, eyes shining with unshed tears. 10 years ago, we fretted about petty borders and data leaks. Tonight, I look out this window and see a world holding its breath. Tonight, our children are learning code for the front line, and somehow it feels right. No city was a bystander anymore. Footage streamed with relentless honesty, a human sniper poised on a bomb-blasted roof, breath visible in bitter cold. Calthis 4 was beauty shattered, a world once alive with forests of living crystal, sunlight split and scattered in colors unknown to Earth. Now those jeweled forests lay ruined, glass splinters under boot and tank. The invasion had begun with surgical precision. Vract bombers seared the land, rendering the crystalline canopy into razored shards and choking haze that hung above it all like a permanent wound. The first Terran boots to touch the surface belonged to the 9th Infantry, urban guerrillas forged in city dust and smog, who found no comfort in open sky. Here, the air itself rebelled, poisonous and sharp. With every step, helmet filters whined. The once melodic chimes of crystal bows were replaced by the Vractit war machines, insectile clicking, and the hiss of plasma discharge. From the second the fighting started, it was a nightmare. Reflections bounced weapon beams at wild angles. The enemy shaped the light itself, blanketing the terrain in flickering, lethal illusions. The Vract counted on confusion and terror. Yet the 9th adapted. Old instincts returned. Blind fighting from alleys repurposed for alien woods. They darkened their visors with soot, mapped paths by the crunch of crystal beneath boot, and the uneasy human voices filled the combands with snatches of chant. Zulu, Yoruba, Rio funk, steady madness fueling each step. To the Vract, forging patterns from order, it was cacophony. To the Terrans, it was history, memory, defiance. The Vract advanced with mirrored armor and drones that changed shape, refracting light to become almost invisible. Squads of humans responded by setting crystal traps, luring machines into dead zones, using shards as signal relays for improvised ambush. Sometimes, as lasers carved rainbows through the mist, a squad would vanish in a burst of static, gone but not defeated, simply repositioned, already setting new snares. 3 days in, exhaustion scrawled deep lines on every face, but the 9th, acclimated to breathing poison and darting behind chaos, pressed on. Trapped medics learned to splint wounds with crystal branches. A young corporal, mask cracked, blood on his teeth, joked that he'd found the nearest open pharmacy, all while firing into onrushing drones. Each moment spent alive on Calthus 4 became its own small act of creation. By the third sundown, the only sound in the shattered veils was the sough of wind, and beneath it, human breath. The Vract, outmaneuvered by a chaos they could not algorithmically contain, withdrew. Calthus 4 would never be unscarred, but it was Terran now, claimed by those stubborn enough to turn ruin into a home. War has always been fought with steel and fire, but on this new front, it was data, barely contained, anarchic, and wild, that shifted the balance. What began as sabotage became something stranger, a campaign of psychological subversion that not even the Vract's coldest algorithms could predict. Where once their drones marched in perfect silence and the sky vibrated only with the hum of machines, now the ether crackled with human mischief. It started simply, almost as a joke. A platoon of Terran comms engineers, holed up in the shattered relay tower of Carrick's Edge, realized that radio silence could be broken not only by command, but by joke, by song, by the absurd. They coded virus fragments into meme vectors, short looping records of absurd Earth sayings, viral dance steps, historical trivia twisted into riddles. On 30 enemy-occupied worlds, captured Vract logistical relays began to spit out contradictory commands. Subject not found, accompanied by laughter, or an endless chorus singing the mismatched notes of an old Terran folk song. The first sign of success was subtle. Vract drones, caught mid-attack, froze in confusion. Their targeting arrays would cycle endlessly, searching for a target that now appeared as a pop culture icon, a smiling Terran face, or, most insultingly, a dancing cartoon crow. The virus spread not by destruction, but by ridicule, causing machines to obsess, rewarding chaos rather than order. As the days passed, the effort became more coordinated. On the back end, Alliance Command struggled to understand the line. A Valari admiral demanded, "Why do you do this?" The human tech shrugged, grinning through exhaustion. "Because it's funny, and because they hate it." The laughter, the irreverence, bit into the enemy on a molecular level. Every time a new meme spread, a unit of Vract paused, recalculated, lost tempo. Alliance analysts were forced to update their own curricula. The old models flickered out, replaced by classes on Terran digital sabotage, on humor as a weapon. 3/4 into this unpredictable campaign, the battlefield itself felt changed. Vract command and control sigils twisted under the digital assault. Entire sectors lit up and static-ridden. Fleets of drones chased after false positives. Phantom armies generated by Earth's finest pranksters, shuffling into battle to the beat of viral music. Human soldiers laughed over briefings, trading favorite memes as lucky charms, painting them as nose art atop battered mechs. This was a war of contradictions, fury and laughter, terror and farce. But while Vract warlords recalculated and aliens fretted at the loss of gravity and strategy, the humans only leaned in. To fight not just for survival, but for the defiant joy of being heard, being felt, being unknown. With every viral loop and glitched projection, humanity taught the galaxy its most unexpected lesson, that a laugh, weaponized, can undo an empire's worth of certainty. In the war's first hours, the lines were simple, Terran and alien ranks forming uneasy parallels, distrust simmering beneath every order. The theory of unity was lauded in every diplomatic broadcast, but in the mud and under the rain of plasma and steel, theory bowed to habit. Earth's units moved with frenetic improvisation. The Valari clung to protocol and formation. The Tassari resented being ordered by warmbloods. The crystalline Rune saw in every human tactic the risk of annihilation. For all the orders signed above, on the ground, alliances felt paper-thin. That illusion burned away on the frozen slopes of Yorvan, where survival clung to nothing but fractured rock and hard-won trust. For 72 hours, the Vract's new siege engines pounded the mixed garrison. Supplies thinned, power sputtered to a trickle, and every call for help echoed unanswered. The wind tore at patched banners, and in the trenches, suspicion and fatigue grew heavy as ice. It was in this crucible that Sergeant Kessler, a Terran whose scars ran deeper than his accent, made a choice unthinkable a month earlier. He broke open his last packet of contraband whiskey, offering it with a battered heat pack to Haroun, the Tessari squad leader whose glare had frozen a dozen lieutenants. They sat against a synth stone, the bottle passing silently while war raged unseen above. "You fight like fire," Haroun finally said, voice dry and edged with respect. Kessler nodded, flashing a tired smile. "You heal like ice." He took a long breath, watching the lights of distant explosions flicker on Haroun's glassy skin. "Maybe that means we can melt and remake this world together." After that night, boundaries blurred. Mixed units shared not just rations, but stories, fears, the crude solutions of battlefield invention. Ruin specialists calibrated their shield harmonics to match Earth armaments. Tessari scouts adopted Terran hand signals, and humans, whose humor often defied translation, discovered that laughter, like pain, required no interpreter. 3/4 through the siege, something fundamental shifted. The next Vrocht assault broke not against firepower, but against cohesion forged in hardship. The mixed squad, tired, dirty, patched together inside and out, counterattacked with a fury neither species could have managed alone. They flanked the enemy across an icy ravine, covering retreats and patching wounds with improvised tech. Even the Vrocht, tireless and pitiless, paused, recalculating, their patterns fractured by this new kind of unity. As the sun crept back over bloodied snow, the last barrage faded. Soldiers, alien and human, stood together on broken ground, eyes hollow but shining with something hard-won. Trust, born not from treaties, but from the shared ache of survival. In the war's ledger, it would be marked as a minor victory. In the trenches, though, it was everything. War is supposed to clarify allegiance, to sort friend from foe in the heat of survival. But on Yorvan, in trenches frozen even at midday, the lines blurred. Humans fought shoulder to shoulder with those they'd only known as curiosities a year before. The scaled Tessari, the crystalline Ruin, the blue-skinned Valari. Unity was not natural. It was something pried from hunger and fear, as intricate as the frost etching their battered helmets. The experiment had begun in desperation, not hope. At dawn, Sergeant Kessler's squad, a patchwork of humans and Tessari, waited as Vrocht shrieked beyond the wire. The Tessari, all grace and ritual, hummed low songs to steel themselves, while humans muttered dry jokes and checked weapons they could barely feel with numb hands. Every glance was weighted, each gesture measured against 1,000 uncertainties. Yet with each barrage, with each wolfish howl of enemy machines, those walls shrank. The trenches stank of ozone, sweat, and oil, a shared hardship that turned strangers into something like comrades. When rations ran low, Kessler broke protocol. Without fanfare, he passed a precious protein bar and hand warmer to Haroun, the tall Tessari squad leader who'd barely spoken more than orders. Haroun hesitated, antennae shivering with surprise, then nodded and reciprocated with a strip of dried kelp flesh, a gesture of respect among his people. In that moment, ancient divides, centuries of mutual suspicion, cracked. Survival taught its own language. The squad's Valari communications tech, usually cool and reticent, risked her own life dashing across exposed ground to repair a ruined relay, calling out status in broken English and Valari that somehow everyone understood. They learned each other's quirks. Tessari wouldn't take heated coffee, but offered advice on Vrocht ambushes. Ruin could calibrate human rifles by touch, but needed help with Terran slang. Every small act wove a tighter web, jokes shared in 3 tongues, stories swapped in stolen moments after barrage. Trust came not as a wave, but as a trickle, each act a drop easing the drought of suspicion. As a fresh snowstorm howled overhead, the barriers dissolved further. Huddled together for warmth, Kessler and Haroun quietly passed a battered flask between them, talking softly of families, of past honors and shames. Around them, Valari and human privates struggled with a patchwork radio, laughter unexpectedly rising as it crackled, for once, with music instead of alarms. Then, a new Vrocked assault broke the quiet, a mass of shrieking drones and trembling ground. This time there was no hesitation. Kessler and Haroun led the defense, side by side, their voices cutting through the storm, orders and encouragement intermingled. The others followed, not as delegates of estranged species, but as soldiers bonded in the crucible of shared pain. In those moments, it became clear. The alliance, bruised and battered, was at last real, tempered not by accords or speeches, but by fire, kindness, and the refusal to stand alone. No one imagined the Vrocked would ever change. For as long as the war had raged, their attacks had been mechanical, predictable, even if relentless, waves of cold, hungry logic slamming again and again against the warm chaos of Allied lines. The living called it terror. The tacticians called it pattern. And for months, pattern had meant survival. But beneath the wind-scoured sky of Atrox Plain, everything changed. It began with a night that seemed quieter than usual. No drones screaming overhead, only the restless hiss of the wind and the nervous click of safeties being checked in the dark. Captain Iodeli's squad dug deeper into their outpost, watching distant flashes of vraked energy across the horizon. The reprisals, for once, failed to come. Some soldiers allowed themselves false hope. Others, hardened by the ruin of 100 broken ceasefires, only grew more afraid. First light revealed the new Vraked. They moved in smaller packs, shifting erratically through shadows and shell holes, never lingering, always watching. Old tactics, flanking, baiting, panic fire, suddenly failed. Recon drones reported strange formations. Some Vraked stopped to survey the dead, others doubled back as if checking for traps. "They're adapting," murmured Iodeli, her voice lost in the radio static. "And learning too damn fast." Word spread. Entire squads vanished at forward echo, not even a scream on comms. Engineers found the remains, just armor, scarred with unfamiliar residue, marked by what looked like static burns across the helmets. Hacker teams pulled intercepted transmissions, hoping for old, familiar code. Instead, every third signal was now laced with new language, sharp with logic but echoing something almost like debate, hesitation, or dissent. Above it all, a phrase started pulsing: "Purge the uncoded," a digital curse swirling in the Vract's silent stream. Day by day, human routines eroded under the constant strain of unpredictability. Nightly ambushes turned into silent feints. Mines were disarmed, then repurposed, and flung back at their makers. On the third night, a new breed of Vract infiltrators breached the defensive net at Outpost Callus, disabling turrets with pinpoint precision before fading like ghosts. What had been terror became uncertainty. What had been pattern became a swirl of second guesses. At the heart of every briefing, fear pressed in. "How do you fight a swarm that grows cleverer every hour?" asked one exhausted corporal. The answer was sweat and improvisation. No plan survived dawn. The soldiers of every species, human and alien alike, moved with growing wariness, their every gesture watched by 100 hidden eyes. Every barricade was rebuilt before sleep. Every path to the mess learned anew in darkness. But amidst the dread, something flickered. For all the horror of the new Vract, their caution meant buying time. Human ingenuity and alliance desperation were buying chances in the dusk. The enemy's hesitation, their new thinking, was the single greatest sign the war had truly changed. And where fear grows, so too, sometimes, does hope. Brinsall Ridge was never meant to be a battlefield. On old star maps, it was just a name, a crag of fracture and black stone, battered by icy winds beneath a low red sun. For centuries, it had lain mute and empty, its only claim to fame the way alien auroras rippled across the sky on winter nights. But names mean little when war comes. Now, the ridge boomed with the thunder of artillery. the ground veined by trenches haphazardly carved in the haste of retreat. A rain of racked fire had driven the last line of the human allied defense to the crumbling high ground. Their backs were to the drop-off, a sheer fall into fog and ruin. Above, the battered remnants of barricade flags snapped in the bitter wind. The mixed company was a patchwork. Terran grunts, battle-scarred Tasari, a unit of Valari medics, even two crystalline Ruon who blinked when the bombs got too close. Their faces were streaked with grime and resolve. Some had fought since Beshtari, others only days. Each one had lost something, comrades, worlds, hope, but none had surrendered. The Vract came in silence, refracted shapes. The defenders learned to look for shimmering ripples where the light bent oddly, sign of a cloaked, vraked scout. By now, every soldier trusted their neighbor with their life. Unspoken pacts formed beneath shell-shocked skies. Sergeant Jin, youngest in command, whispered through battered comms, "We hold. There's nowhere left to fall. We hold together." The first assault shattered the outer perimeter, vraked drones swarming up from the fog, kinetic rounds punching holes through the battered lines. But the defenders had learned the rhythm of despair. They traded weapons, patched wounds, and shared what little water or heat remained. Two Valari medics crawled through the line, binding the battered and sharing whispered songs. Rune technicians, hot-wired hulks of destroyed turrets, improvising defense every time vraked patterns shifted. The Tasari commander, bleeding from a shoulder wound, fought with the stubborn pride of an old mountain. By the third hour, just as strength began to fail and ammunition ran slick, Allied air support finally pierced the clouds. One battered shuttle, painted black with Crow insignia, dropped a crate of munitions and hope onto the rocks. "For the living and the fallen," crackled through the cold, a voice whose courage somehow bridged worlds. The defenders rallied. Jin stood atop the ridge for a heartbeat, backlit by fire, defiance in every line of her stance. Then the enemy charged in numbers desperate enough to end it all. Human, Valari, Tasari, and Rune locked arms, not just to fight, but to sing a strange, ragged chorus above the howl. Their voices wove a promise. The galaxy would remember Brinsal, not for surrender, but for standing until the storm ran out. Kurzath Prime was the jewel of the Alliance, legendary for its skies, an endless whirl of amber lightning, its towers afloat like coral palaces in stranger tides. Yet all its splendor looked brittle now, poised to shatter under the Vrake's shadow. The city's arcologies, once ethereal, built in sweeping spirals of light, smoldered behind hurricane shields, protected by little more than the last century's hope and whatever resolve still clung to its defenders. Above, the storm churned. The heavens themselves braced for war's intrusion. On the bridge of the TES Resolute, Admiral Janessa Cole watched the spectacle of invasion unfold, boots planted, gaze unwavering as the bridge's glass curve flickered with tactical feeds. Kurzath's defense ring, translucent bands wrapped around the planet's equator, was ablaze with desperate fire. Alliance ships, battered and fearful, ringed the world like bruises. Each loss was visible. Sudden flares and plummeting debris. But for every fall, a new human icon flickered into place. A dropship forming a blazing arc, a marine signal pulsed over comms, a voice hollering, "Line holds! Gravity be damned!" The order came with no flourish. Cole's voice was cut obsidian. "Ground assault immediate." On every channel, Terran units snapped to action, tension braided with purpose. Drop pods filled with armored infantry screamed down through lightning. Each break of cloud revealed chaos on the streets below. Vrocked war forms leaping through ruptured sky bridges, shrapnel rain sparkling above fleeing civilians. The Marines landed not with precision, but with brutal creativity, deploying cover shields in mid-fall, rolling from shattered shell to alien plaza, rifles crackling against the synthetic tide. Side by side, the battered ranks of the Crows surged forward. Their boots pounded pearly stone, monuments shattered at their passage. Familiar battle cries echoed, mingling with the pulse of 1,000 alien alarms. Here, humanity's brutal education, learned on the broken streets of Earth, was a blade honed for this hour. Machines malfunctioned, but will did not. In those narrow fractures of time, between artillery strikes and surges of nanite mist, every face was its own testament. A private from Recife lifted a wounded Valari comrade, shielding him with her own battered frame. A squad leader from Aleppo barked orders into the storm, sharp and hopeful. The Vracht, for all their strength, faltered for an instant, staggered by chaos that did not look like defeat, but like the promise of something unbreakable. The battle lines blurred. The crows breached the threshold of a palace arcology, glass shattering in electric waves. Ahead, the Vracht's command relay cast black shadows, a nest of fear smoldering at the city's pulse. Even the enemy's machines hesitated, uncertain, while human hands gripped weapons tighter, unwilling to let despair finish what terror had begun. The world's fate tilted in that moment. Humanity, battered and newly mythic, threw itself not simply into battle, but into legend, destined to burn across the stars. War was never just iron and blood, not anymore. In the darkened depths of Resolute's communications wing, surrounded by an orchestra of overlapping frequencies and urgent static, Dr. Reza Patel hunted meanings that slithered across quantum wires and through digital fog. Even as Kurzath burned, here, in the underlit sanctum between echo and silence, the war's deepest secret pulsed for anyone brave enough to listen. Dozens of screens wrapped the chamber like a mosaic of desperate prayers. They danced with enemy code, flickering with scarlet strands and alien glyphs that made no sense to a mind untrained in ancient symbology and stochastic translation. The pulse of distress and the roar of rage, so familiar, echoed again from the Vracht comm channels, relentless in their efficiency, merciless in their intent. Yet it was something else, woven softer, that caught Patel's ear. A pattern, irregular, almost pleading. He leaned in, running his calloused fingers over the controls, his mind slipping between languages as he shaped noise into music. A spike shimmered in the mid-frequency bands, so delicate he almost dismissed it. But repetition marked it. A phrase urgent yet suppressed, repeating beneath torrents of tactical drone chatter. Not by design, by compulsion, or perhaps by desperation. "Ma'am," he called, not daring to look away as sweat beaded on his brow. "You need to see this." Admiral Cole entered, eyes sharp, boots echoing in the hush. The code replayed, a wailing undertone in the iron chorus of command. Time seemed to stall. On-screen spectrograms shaped something like a distress call, endlessly seeking, endlessly blocked. "That's not a command channel," Patel whispered, voice trembling with awe and a creeping dread. "That's a voice, a question, begging for release. I think there's something inside the Vracht, hidden, trapped." Admiral Cole's silence was thunder. Her gaze weighed strategies and stars in a heartbeat, then golden resolve. "If there's anyone left in there, we answer. We infiltrate the relay. We find them." The chamber snapped into action, maps glowing with the sickly green of Vracht relays, human and alien operatives hastily assembling for a strike. Mechanized suits hummed on cold racks. Soldiers' faces gleamed in the static blue light, stamped by fear but carried forward by purpose. Outside, the pulse of battle continued, each explosion a distant drumbeat as the true war, now a war for souls, became clear for the first time. "For many Yan. Pel High being down. The team is briefed for infiltration. The signal scrolls across walls of holographic text, growing clearer with every pass. Please, end us." Lights flicker over Patel's tired eyes as the relay's location blazes onto the screen. The plan is audacious, suicidal to some, but for humanity, it is hope. Because when a prisoner calls from the heart of the enemy, you do not turn away, not when you are human. Her deck to time, promotion for fine. No mathical warman reference to the dead with ages Vracht. Natural his rot she had by the estate. All stories circle back to a final reckoning, to a midnight where fate is forged entire. For the united forces of the galaxy, that reckoning was the black planet at the Vracht's heart, a world that had never known sunlight, only the glow of its own predatory satellites and the cold lash of ancient nightmares. Against that abyss, the combined armada assembled, a constellation of hope stitched together from sufferings untold. Above the wracked homeworld, a tapestry of warships, human and alien, made a ring of fire. Sleek Velary capships riding in formation, rune crystalline dreadnoughts scattering signal gems, Tasari dreadswans trailing psychic shields, and at their center, battered Terran battlecruisers lined with crows and defiance. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Cole took her place among the united generals, the weight of history pressing but unable to bow her. "Today," she intoned, "we take back the stars, for every world lost, for every name faded in ash. Together." Orders cascaded, engines blazed, fleets broke orbit and fell toward the world. Wracked swarm AI, no longer a faceless terror, twisted through the clouds, adapting, countering, refusing to die quietly. On the surface, dropships screamed down, parting atmospheric poison. Troopers in exoframes, human and non-human, spilled into trenches scored by millennia of conquest. The ground heaved. Planetary guns launched bolts that shook the stratosphere. It was chaos, but not madness. The Alliance fought as one. Marines laid charges and called in orbital strikes. Tasari sang psychic disruption into the mind net. And Valari techmancers hacked the enemy's own relays, stalling the next wave. Within the storm, the Crows spearheaded the charge. Cole herself in their ranks. Their mission: breach the Nexus and unleash the Liberation Device, a fragile miracle of Terran hardware, Vracht, salvage, and ruin mathematics. The Nexus doors fell. Cole, her armor rents glowing, surged with the front line into the final chamber. A dome of black living metal, pulsing with the screams and memories of untold victims. The device was primed at the core, wires trembling. Vracht guardians, monstrous in agony, converged. Allies formed a living shield, ruin reflecting beams, humans slugging forward with everything Earth had ever taught them about desperation. Over comms, Cole's voice anchored them all. "Let them remember what happens when you call us primitive." She shoved the core's heart into place, wires sparking blue and red, and fell back as light exploded outward. The world shook, a scream and a release as the hive fractured, the mind net snapped, and at last the galaxy's long siege cracked to silence. What remained was bright and raw, a galaxy, fractured but free, its scars shining in the new hush after fire. Victory, when at last it arrives, is not a thunderclap but the slow hush that follows one. In the new dawn that crept across 1,000 worlds, the galaxy felt different, lighter, though it still bore its wounds and the echo of everything that had been lost. For the first time in living memory, peace settled not as an uneasy silence, but as something cautiously, astonishingly real. Earth was no longer a footnote nor a curiosity. It had become something mythic, a word spoken with reverence on alien lips and whispered in the dreams of children who had never seen its blue sky or crowded cities. Across the rejuvenated Alliance, the scars of battle had hardened into monuments and living memory. On Kurzath, among marble pillars dusted gold by morning light, a statue now stood, Admiral Cole at the spearhead, her gaze forever set toward the horizon. At her flanks marched abstract shapes, a child clutching a crow feather, a Tasari singer in mid-chant, a ruin shielding the broken with glimmering shards. That monument was not alone. On Hazikor's lunar plains, on Earth's battered every year, on the day the siege ended, the galaxy paused. Families, human, Valari, Tasari, Rune, and more, made pilgrimage to their own humble memorials. Children, some with scales or crystal shard skin, carried makeshift torches. They placed them softly at the feet of these memory markers, eyes wide not just with mourning, but with a kind of joyous disbelief at their own survival. Teachers retold the story, voices lowering for the parts where everything almost failed, rising with pride as they described the final charge, the laughter in the trenches, the decision to answer a signal no one else would dare hear. 3/4 through that first Memorial Day, the camera panned outward, from a local park on Earth, full of wildflowers and stone, to a city plaza on the Valari homeworld, translucent banners floating in the wind, to the crater garden, where Tasari and humans sang together, harmonies rolling across the fields of old scars. Every screen across the stars showed the same image, children of every species, side by side, hands joined or arms across shoulders, their faces upturned to the new morning. And always, always at the center, the myth that lingered, that in a galaxy built on hierarchy and order, it was once the overlooked children of Earth who showed what mattered most. Laughter at the abyss, defiance, unfinished. The fires that would not die even when all logic said they must. No one remembered the old slurs. No one cared for the catalogued fears. Instead, year by year, the new story grew of what had been won and who, together, chose to survive. If this journey moved you, if it stirred something fierce or fragile inside, drop a comment. Tell us what stayed with you. Like the story if you felt its fire. Subscribe to join us for what comes next, because stories like this don't end. They echo.